Hello, my name is Elizabeth Albright, and I'm the Children's Education and Events Coordinator here at the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Center. We are here with Thomas Jefferson, our third President of the United States. He was responsible for leading the Louisiana Purchase. He acquired land that more than doubled the United States territory. In that process, we were searching for a waterway to the Pacific Ocean. Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark on this expedition for that sole purpose, to find the Northwest Passage and to gain access to the Pacific Ocean. This was something at the time that was highly sought after by many countries, was to find that other waterway. Thomas Jefferson sent Lewis and Clark on this expedition to not only find the Pacific Ocean in the north and the Northwest Passage, but also explore the land within. At the time, we had no idea the climate, the weather, the terrain. We had no idea what kinds of flora or fauna or what types of indigenous or native people lived on the land. Thomas Jefferson had several roles and responsibilities that the crew, the Corps of Discovery, as well as Lewis and Clark had to accomplish while they were on the expedition, and Thomas Jefferson is going to tell you about them now.
Northwest Passage. The Spanish, French, and British also want to discover that Northwest Passage. But the nation that finds it first will control North America's destiny. In January of 1803, I wrote a secret message to Congress. I requested funds for an expedition led by my former personal secretary, Meriwether Lewis. Congress granted my request. In June of 1803, I sent instructions to Lewis. I described my hopes and his responsibilities. I included the following instructions. Find the Northwest Passage. Carefully record what you observe and learn. Make 2 copies of your records in case one is lost or damaged. Record longitude and latitude so that maps may be made. Record descriptions of the natural environment, weather, and climate. Develop friendly relations with the native peoples. Learn about their tribal nations, their goods, languages, laws, traditions, and attitudes. How they farm, fish, hunt, create art, and battle in war. Give them peace medals and other gifts. Arrange for influential chiefs to visit Washington, D.C. Captain Lewis, I give you absolute authority to carry out this military mission of exploring the West. May you and all who serve in this mission safely return with information that will benefit the scientific, commercial, and national interests of our great and growing country.
Find while they were on the search for the Northwest Passage? What kinds of animals did they encounter? Were they able to grow on the land? Was this the type of space that a lot of native plants, what types of native plants grew on this space? What did it look like? Because that would impact the commercial piece. The commercial standpoint would be, how can our nation create a system of trade so that we can make money and grow in the commerce area of our country, which we now know today was very successful. So in part, I feel like our great country is what it is today, largely from the Lewis and Clark expedition and what they were able to discover. This area throughout here represents each of the members of the Corps of Discovery and what each of their roles and responsibilities do. So over here in this section, it discusses what the privates would be responsible to do and the types of things that they would carry along with them just to be safe, what they would be responsible for. Things like a journal. They spoke about how there needed to be multiple journals kept. And that makes sense, as if the first journal were to be lost, then the information would not make it back home safe. So many men kept journals on the expedition so that they could report their findings back to Thomas Jefferson and to the country. There are also sections about exploring by water and if you were a hunter, the types of things that you would be looking for. And I really like this section because I feel like this really connects with kids and families as well that have done maybe tracking before, or maybe they've gone hunting. They can really connect here. Or maybe I had several students that were fishermen and like to go fishing with grandpa or dad. And so they like to really look at what are the different ways that they were able to fish and compare and contrast what's their fishing experience and tools compared to the things that maybe they would carry, or how would it feel to be a boatman? How would it feel to be a member of the Corps of Discovery? And I think that this section really helps conceptualize not only why did we go on the Lewis and Clark expedition, what were we searching for, but what were their jobs? Who were these men? And they all deserve to be honored because they all contributed.
So I noticed the murals are very well painted.
They are.
Are they?
They are hand painted.
Who did that?
I'm going to have to double check. I know Henry Payer Jr. painted on the other side.
Here I need to apologize because I want to do a voiceover. My microphone was not on during part of this time, and I wanted to catch her voice. I think we got her voice real well, but mine was not very good. And so I'm doing this voiceover. I was pointing out how well painted these murals are. When you come to the center, you'll see they look very lifelike in 3D, and they depict very well. And the size of them is very large. I don't know what medium. Maybe he just used wall paint to paint them with, or acrylic, but they came out very well. And so I wanted to point out the murals. It was Henry Payer Jr. that painted all the murals.
Henry Payer, he's so talented. I just look at,
told me about that.
I mean, his ability to create perspective and show the men in different spaces is really, really amazing. The what? The dog? Seaman? Yeah, we always hit him at the very end.
Okay.
So what we do is we start here with Thomas Jefferson, and then we move on to the map.
Okay.
And then chronologically, it follows from left to right what happened in the expedition and what makes Sioux City significant. So this map is very special because it discusses the route and the Louisiana Purchase. They literally traveled in our own backyard. It shows in the legend, based on their color-coded system, the section where they were preparing Thomas Jefferson's home in Monticello up to Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. They were preparing and planning this trip, what they wanted accomplished, what they were looking for, what they thought would advance the United States. In the green section, starting in Pittsburgh all the way to St. Louis, was their recruitment route. That was where they identified men of the area that would be significant, helpful, and loyal that they could count on to recruit to be members of the Corps of Discovery. On Camp River Dubois, all the way to Fort Clatsop was the exploration route. This entire area was incredibly treacherous and daunting for many of the men, but they knew that it would lead to an advancement for the United States and the country.
So this is the Louisiana Purchase.
Right. So in this section here in yellow is the land that was purchased in the Louisiana Purchase. Everything to the right was what originally was the United States. When we say it more than doubled, it truly did. It actually includes our entire state of Iowa. So we feel very, very lucky to be able to be here and to be celebrating Lewis and Clark on their journey, because they definitely had a significant impact in our current Siouxland area.
It's interesting how pretty much just put South Dakota right in there.
Absolutely.
It's the border. It's at St. Missouri in the third, and then it's the western border of Iowa in most places, and then a little bit of Nebraska here to the north.
And then up into South Dakota, and then up into North Dakota. And a big misconception is that Sacagawea was all along with Lewis and Clark for the entire journey. So a lot of people that come through believe that she was in Sioux City alongside them. She was not. She, in fact, did not meet up with them until North Dakota.
Now, the Missouri River starts clear up in here, I think, someplace way up here somewhere by Butte, Montana. That's where the river starts, I believe.
I do know that we have a section that describes the different types of boats.
This keelboat was constructed in Pittsburgh. It must have come down the Ohio, Allegheny, into the Ohio. It says the boat builder was drunk, quarreled with his workmen. So this is a replica. Scale, I'm not sure what the scale is. This must be the quarters in here. It's called a keelboat. Like a covered wagon. Interesting. They had sails on it to help them. Although the trip west, normally does not have good winds pushing it. So that's the boat. Long and narrow to help with current going upstream, slip the current better. And the picture behind is the men in the boat.
That were they couldn't ride on a keelboat the entire time because the keelboat was too wide for the river. And so by the time that they hit those other waterways, they had to pare down to other smaller sized ships as well to be able to travel.
This looks like it was a pass. Pass.
The Lemhi Pass.
Because they couldn't boat across that.
Right.
And then Snake River picks up.
And then they ended up in Fort Clatsop where they found the Pacific Ocean. And then they made their trek back.
Interesting.
Very much. I can't imagine traveling that amount of space and into that amount of unknown. It would be thrilling, but it would be daunting. Sioux City, Iowa is significant in the Lewis and Clark expedition in that we had the only member from the Corps of Discovery die on the whole entire journey. And if you truly think about it, the average age for a man that was on the journey, that was a member of the Corps of Discovery, was only about 21. And that's actually the age that Charles Floyd here is. Charles Floyd was one of 9 men from Kentucky that was recruited to be a member of the Corps of Discovery. He showed great leadership potential from the get. He was honored for showing great strength, both personally and being able to lead and being able to help with all the men. Unfortunately, About 3 months into the journey, Sergeant Floyd falls ill. And when I have school tours, what I say to them is, when we listen to Charles Floyd, we're going to listen really closely so that we can determine one thing. Did Charles Floyd die due to something caused on the expedition? Or did he die due to something else? So we are going to listen to him to figure that out.
My name is Charles Floyd, one of 3 sergeants on the Lewis and Clark expedition, instructed by President Thomas Jefferson to find and map the Northwest Passage that will open our country to great prosperity. It was August 1st, 1803. I was 21 years old, a constable carrying mail between Louisville, Kentucky and Vincennes, Indiana Territory, when Captain Clark recruited me, one of the first 3 permanent members of the Corps of Discovery. He and Captain Meriwether Lewis saw leadership ability and physical strength in me. They made me one of their 3 sergeants. Captain Lewis later would call me a young man of much merit. As a sergeant, I commanded a small squad of soldiers. I rotated work on the keelboat and supervised basics of camp life. This freed the captains to work on the expedition's diplomatic and scientific objectives. As a sergeant, I was required to keep a journal as a record of our voyage, in case the captain's journals were lost. I was proud to serve on this mission into the treacherous unknown, to carry out my duties, to abide by my captain's orders to the best of my abilities, to cooperate fully in reaching our destination, the Pacific Ocean. With my own eyes, I would see the Pacific Ocean and encounter all wonder and hardship that lay before it. I would return home to tell the story. I died of natural causes on August 20th, 1804, here in this land, just 3 months after our departure from St. Charles, and more than a year before the Corps of Discovery saw the Pacific Ocean. My journey is all that is left to commemorate my part in this important expedition.
He was only 21 years old.
Poor Charles Floyd. Unfortunately, Charles Floyd had what we know as appendicitis. Appendicitis is inflammation and infection of your appendix. Now, I tell my students, all of you have organs inside your body, like your heart and your lungs, and those are essential. You need them to live. But your body also has some organs that you could actually live without, and the appendix is one. Now, with the modern medicine that we have, what you do is if you have appendicitis, you go to the doctor, you have a small procedure, you heal up, and you're good as new. But unfortunately, during this time in 1804, that type of procedure and that type of medical knowledge did not exist. In fact, the first appendectomy didn't even occur until 20 years after he passed. So they didn't even have knowledge for the actual procedure. So what they did was try to help him is several different medical practices, if you will. They tried several different things to try to make him feel better. For example, these small little BBs down here, you see it says thunderclappers. Thunderclappers were laxative pills, and they thought that these powerful laxatives and medicines would make him throw up, and it would purge out any of the infection or the illness. The other thing that they tried is this copper bowl in the back. They believed at this time, in this colonial period of time, that if you were sick or if you had some sort of infection, illness, ailment, that it was in your blood. So if you got rid of that bad blood, your body would naturally replace it and infection be gone. But we all know that that is not in fact correct. And so they actually think that that is what led to George Washington's demise, was he was sick with a sore throat and they used a bleeding bowl and used too much. But as I was saying, with the bleeding bowl, we know that the infection doesn't lie in the blood and in fact would have just made him weaker. No medical procedure or knowledge at this time would have done anything, unfortunately, to help Charles Floyd, and he would have passed whether he was home or whether he was on the expedition. I know.
Are these thunderclappers naturally occurring, or are they synthesized?
I am going to read. I'm sure that it was, I mean, it had to have been a crude synthesization, if anything,
Yeah,
for 1800s.
Therapeutics they had at that time.
Completely. Like cloves. They were like, what were they using cloves for? They were using it to like basically smell, and that would make you feel better. Or like that tooth key, if you had a rotten tooth, they would pass for the rest of my life. Are you kidding? No way. So yeah, I always tell students, think about if you were in some sort of like a medical situation and you needed help from a doctor or a hospital. This is the highest level of care that you could hope for on the trail. So right about this, he was ill during this time. He hadn't yet passed. But what happened right before he did pass is that a member of the Corps of Discovery named Moses Reed deserted camp and took off. And when the Corps of Discovery realized that he had left, I think that betrayal made them obviously upset. And I think it made them distrust each other for the first time. And whereas before, you're with a group of almost friends, brothers in arms, brothers in expedition. You're about 21 years old. You're so excited. You get to go change the literal nation. You get to make it grow and be better. And you get to play a part in it. But then your friend deserts you, who you thought you could trust. And Sergeant Floyd, as I was saying earlier, wasn't just a regular member of the Corps of Discovery. He was identified as a leader early on. And he was chosen of all the men for one of 3 sergeant positions. They needed him as a leader because he was embodying those types of qualities that needed to have the leadership to move on with the Corps of Discovery. So we had somebody abandoned, not a great feeling, but then we had our leader die, our leader and our friend that we trusted. And so the next section that we're going to move on to, in my opinion, I truly believe that this poster is one of my favorites of all because it explains in great detail how the grave of Sergeant Floyd began, and then now currently, how in the stone obelisk that it is today, it took almost a century, including a couple of rescue attempts. For example, 50 years after Floyd died, the shifting river had nearly devoured his grave. Flooding in March of 1857, it sent a large part of the bluff into the river and took part of the grave with it. Parts of the skeleton were recovered, and 2 months later, Floyd's remains were reburied 200 yards east of the original grave site. After that, they found his journals. So several people were required to keep journals. And so when his journals were discovered, it led to this big push from people of the area, from people of the nation that said, we have to find him. So not only did the Corps of Discovery honor him, but the people of Siouxland did as well. We had to save him multiple times and find him and build something that honors the type of man that would go on such a treacherous journey and be so brave to help us now in the future.
So this is sort of a replica of the cedar post that.
Correct. So this would be the scene with Lewis and Clark when they would be burying Sergeant Floyd. So at this time, even you will notice the expressions on the men painted in the background. Everyone is wearing their dress uniform and everyone is very morose. This was a huge gut punch, if you will, to these, crew members. How were they going to carry on without somebody that really led them and that they really trusted, and they had to find a way to go on? Lewis and Clark are going to talk a little bit about the crew members and what their concerns for them were moving forward with all of the situations that are going on from Moses Reed deserting to now Charles Floyd passing away.
All of the honors of war, the only decent thing we could do. The men performed well, Clark.
Your reading was stirring, Captain.
Precious little. You spend months thinking of everything you could possibly need on an expedition so important to our country. But somehow you're still unprepared for moments like this.
But surely, under the circumstances,
I keep thinking if only I'd recognized your symptoms sooner.
all happened so fast.
I know.
You mustn't blame yourself, Captain.
Sometimes I wish I had your common sense, Clark. Of course, that's why I insisted you share this command in the first place. I couldn't have asked more from any man today.
Everyone was more willing. Besides, couldn't have found a more handsome spawn of lovers.
I only hope the grave is left undisturbed.
The coffin should help clear them as deep as we could.
God forbid we ever have to make another one.
I'd be surprised if we did.
Who knows what lies ahead of us? How do you think the men are holding up?
As well as could be expected. Some of them are pretty young.
And death a stern teacher, I know. Sergeant Floyd was well thought of, that's the man. We need more like him. Do you think Gas can handle his command?
Yes, sir. Put it through one of the men.
Some of these roughnecks, especially a deserter like me, I don't know.
You better push on, sir. None of us got much sleep last night and we'll have to make camp soon. Until now, much longer this good weather will last.
It is a beautiful evening. This land is something special, Clark. What we're doing here is service to our country of honorable men like Sergeant Floyd. It can't be in vain. There's no doubt in my heart whatsoever.
So they realized that morale was very low and they had to find a way to push on together. And I think that a lot of people can relate with that. And so now as leaders, they had to think of a strategy in a way to be able to bring the Corps back together, raise spirits a little bit, and that's going to lead to their next idea and their next decision. Since Sergeant Floyd has passed, they needed to find a man to replace him. I know that with Sergeant Gas, or not, excuse me, not Sergeant Gas, Sergeant Reed abandoning the crew, I know that they felt like with him being appointed by Lewis and Clark and Sergeant Charles Floyd passing away, they needed to give the Corps of Discovery some sort of ownership, some sort of say. And so what they did, instead of giving the title to somebody else, they let the men vote, which I think did bring back a sense of we get a say, we get to choose who our replacement is and promote somebody that we do want to follow. Because that in unsurety is not what you would want in having somebody that is your leader.
Are they all civilians or are they all military? The whole group?
They were civilians. Some may have played a part in the military. So for example, Meriwether Lewis and Captain Clark had a direct relationship with Thomas Jefferson ahead of time, but not necessarily everybody. A lot of them were, I kind of try to describe it to the kids like the dream team. I want to find the best fisherman. I want to find the fastest rower. And so they, in their recruitment process, they tried to find the best of whatever they could possibly. Correct. Yep.
Not botanist, but survivalist guy.
Exactly.
Doctors.
Yes. Hardy ability to survive the elements ability. Yes. So this is Private Gas. So he served under Sergeant Floyd, and he was a private at the time when Sergeant Floyd passed. He was responsible for things like setting up camp and helping get camp together, but he wasn't necessarily responsible for any sort of leadership position. He did help everybody on the Corps of Discovery with his jobs, and he was definitely somebody that always was there to help the Corps, always was there to contribute and honest and truthful. They chose him for his characteristics and his character traits. And I just wanted to point out his uniform and the things that he is carrying, because he is more, it's not a dress uniform. It's more of a relaxed uniform, which indicates his rank. He's carrying buckets to indicate he's responsible for things like making boat repairs or setting up camp. But once he was promoted to Sergeant Gas, my personal favorite thing is that instead of the bucket, he now has the quill and the journal. They were responsible to keep the multiple journals like Sergeant Floyd was doing. And now that he is passed, he is expected to continue to carry on the documenting of what they discover on their expedition. I also wanted to point out the dress uniform that he has here. It is more of an official sergeant style uniform, and tied together with the keeping track of everything that he discovered in his journal. This indicates his upgrade in status from a private.
So if he had to become a journal taker, at least he had to be literate. Were they all literate?
I would assume not at that time. And that's a really good point, because now,
Who you voted.
exactly. Well, no kidding. How are you?
Can you read and write?
Absolutely. And how can you describe? Because, for example, when they came across a prairie dog, they didn't necessarily know what to call a prairie dog. Do you know what they called it? A barking squirrel. Super funny. But that's in the midst of discovery, you have to be able to describe it like that for sure. So this mural over here depicts dealing with Moses Reed when he deserted the crew. So when Moses Reed deserted the crew and they found out about it, he left without permission completely, and he did take things from camp with him. They sent Drouillard, who was a soldier, to find him. He did, and he brought him back. What they did is they held a trial for him, and the men decided that he could stay, but they decided that his punishment would have to be that he was put through the gauntlet. Yes, but he did get to stay. There are several fun stories of the members of the Corps of Discovery on the expedition. We are eventually going to be putting an entire section in our hallway that's going to be dedicated to the unsung heroes of the expedition and just kind of the fun stories. And
Of course, you think about it, it's like, how many were on the whole party? Was
40. 40.
40. It's a lot. All of the feed getting together. So there's a lot of dynamics going on.
And that's just it. And then the personalities and the
Dramatize, everybody's a hero.
trapped on a boat.
You smell, or
Yes.
you don't carry your own weight.
Or can't trust you, or not. Yes, completely. I would say, hands down, this is not only my favorite animatronic of our entire center, but this is my favorite member of the Corps of Discovery. York was a slave that belonged to Captain Clark, but he was different than any other slave of his time in that he was trusted. He was allowed to carry a gun. He was allowed to hunt. He was allowed to work side by side every other member of the Corps of Discovery. I personally find to be what makes him a most significant member is that he was a loyal and good friend. When Sergeant Floyd started to get sick and feel ill until the time that he passed, York never left his side. At that time, a slave would never have been allowed to administer medicine, and he did. He did anything he possibly could to help his friend feel better. And when he did pass, he was also in part helpful with the burial as well. And I don't know any better characteristic in the world than a loyal and true friend like that. So we're going to listen to him talk a little bit about what his experiences were.
I am York. I was born to be the slave and body servant of young William Clark. In 1803, Master William Clark was contacted by his old friend Meriwether Lewis to help command an expedition to find a route to the ocean out west. Of course, I was to come on the trip and leave my wife and family behind for who knows how long. On the trail, I helped with everything: mapping, hunting, pushing and pulling the boat, and protecting what we had. I had a gun, which meant I had the trust of men. No slave was ever allowed to carry a gun. I cared for poor Sergeant Floyd when he took ill. None of the captain's medicines could make him better. We buried him atop a hill by what we call Floyd's River. I saw and did amazing things. I saw places where few white men have been. I climbed snow-capped mountains and swam swift-moving rivers. I walked among the native people who welcomed me with open arms. They were amazed at my black skin and called me Big Medicine. And I was there when we finally reached the ocean waters. Now I ask that you remember me and my name, so my voice and my story will be heard for generations and generations to come.
I love this section of our artwork over here. So like I said, I'm in charge of the children's education and events, and our children's mascot is actually a pelican, because on the Lewis and Clark expedition, they saw pelicans dive into the ocean and with their big bills, scoop up the fish, filter out the water, and they became curious what a pelican's bill could hold. So they found a deceased pelican and they filled it full of water. Could you guess how much water it was in there? A pelican's beak can hold?
Yeah, probably say 10 liters.
10 liters? How many gallons is that?
I think it's like, what is that, liters?
The conversion.
36 ounces or something.
5 gallons anyway.
So I know it's 5 gallons,
It's 5 gallons.
but yeah, because storks, they can carry a lot of fish.
It's the flexibility of that gullet. It's so insane.
My question is, if you look at more important things to do than think about how much a pelican can weigh,
Well, they can bring a baby and, they fly babies around. So
I know, isn't that crazy?
that's how babies get here,
Oh yeah, silly me. A lot of people that visit our center believe that this is Sacagawea. This is not Sacagawea. In fact, this is a native woman from the Sioux tribe. It makes sense because we live in Sioux land. She is displaying a traditional painted buffalo robe. Lewis and Clark returned home, and their most prized possession that they returned home with, in their mind, was their native robe, or their native buffalo robe that was painted, depicting a war from the Mandan people. It was very significant to be able to report back to Thomas Jefferson. One of the main goals that he wanted to find out, he wanted to know how they fished, hunted, fought in war, what the culture was, and he wanted them to make friends with them. Many buffalo robes represent what is called a winter count. And what a winter count is essentially how our years work from January to December, but imagine it on a wheel, in a circle. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, October, November, December. In that pattern, the winter count represents about the same thing. And what it does is it represents with certain symbols and different pictures, it depicts what happened in that tribe during that period of time. And it had to be something significant. Like I said before, this is the example of the buffalo robe that on the Lewis and Clark expedition of the battle with the Mandan warriors, it could represent an actual full scene, but it could also represent the tribe as a whole. It could represent what happened culturally and significantly for us during this year.
That's your first one.
So the buffalo robe is an example of native culture being depicted and being significant and special. On buffalo hunts, people would, when Native American people would kill the buffalo or hunt the buffalo, they believed that it was respectful to be able to use every part of the animal. So they would eat the meat. They would use the hide for things like a buffalo robe, but they would also use things like the skeleton for other things as well. For example, in this next section, we have a display of traditional Native games. And being a Midwest state, I know we get so much snow. Our kids go sledding pretty frequently. I try to get them to visualize. Imagine you're a Native child in the 1800s. This would be your sled. This is a sled that is made out of bison skeleton, out of a bison rib. And there's many other significant pieces here as well that animals have contributed to. For example, these winged bones was an early Native game that was kind of like darts and kind of like curling. Men slid these winged bones along the ice and they competed for the distance. The very bottom white part that's flat, that would traditionally be a cow or a buffalo rib. The front of it is pointed and the back of it is flat. And they knew whose was whose because each was inscribed to distinguish from each other. So kind of like we write our names on things now, kids would write their name on their things too.
So they check those. What are those made of?
Oh, so this is my favorite game.
Willows or something?
Yes, so this would have been like it looks like it would be like a braided leather.
Okay.
And it would be a traditional wood hoop. And they obviously painted it. I love this game for two reasons. One, I think it personally would be so engaging. Every student that comes in here, oh, I would love to play that game. It's called the webbed hoop game. It's a webbed hoop and a spear. One team threw the hoops and the other team attempted to spear the hoops. And if you pierced the center of a hoop, you earned maximum points. So fun, right? But it's amazing in that it's actually training children to hunt and how to hit a moving while incorporating fun.
Winged bones.
Winged bones.
Okay. It's a little different than what Nintendo they have now, or
The
Sony
PlayStation 5.
PlayStation 5, or the $600.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's the Native games. Great.
And then I also have our native buffalo dance mural. And that's this. So Henry Payer as well. Isn't that amazing? Henry Payer painted this mural to depict the traditional native buffalo dance. It's a series of encounters between native people and the core of discovery where they had to demonstrate what their culture was. And they demonstrated this dance. This buffalo dance was performed in the hopes that it would bring the buffalo herd closer and lead to a successful hunt. There are many traditional symbols in this artwork, and I love that Henry Payer identified his own native tribe in his artwork as well. He is a part of the Omaha or Ho-Chunk tribe, and he included many symbols in here for Native Americans, including the Ho-Chunk tribe.
What are they holding? Everybody's got a.
They're holding a peace pipe. They're holding a hand pan, which would have been leather pulled tight, and they would use this as a mallet. There would be there's different traditional things like hoops, and each step and each piece of the dance represents and symbolizes something significant that they would like to call out to create their successful hunt for them. Explorer himself. There's lots of funny stories from all of these different about how Sacagawea was the interpreter. So she was the member that was the go-between to be able to understand and communicate between Lewis and Clark and the Native people. Before she was able to be with them, they also had to come up with different ideas of how to be able to express friendship and peaceful. That's what they were searching for, was for peaceful friendship and uniting with our country. And so how they did that was they exchanged gifts. So they distributed things like peace medals, tobacco, and beads, just to be able to show some sort of diplomacy and building up of relationships with the Native people. On the front of the peace medals was Thomas Jefferson, and on the back of the peace medal was two shaking hands with a rifle and a peace pipe crossing.
Now that's not an actual peace medal.
No, but we do have example peace medals though too.
That's a display.
Right. This is a display peace medal, not an actual. I wish we could have an actual one, but no, not a real one. So this is Seaman. He was in Newfoundland and he belonged to Captain Lewis. He was bought for $20, which was an entire year's salary. He was Captain Lewis's dog, but at the end of the journey, the Corps of Discovery ended up calling him our dog, which I love. He was a Newfoundland with webbed feet, so he was really able to swim in water very well. In fact, they named him Seaman because his name meant little sailor. So I think that's adorable. He loved his members of the Corps of Discovery and was as loyal as any other human member. He protected the team when a bear was going to attack. He scared it away. He also brought an elk to the Corps of Discovery to eat. He had somehow been able to fight down an elk and bring it in for them to eat. Another significant thing that happened to Seaman was, unfortunately, he was abducted by a Native American tribe. We had kind of spoken about how they were unable to really communicate because they spoke different languages at the time, and Seaman was kidnapped, and eventually he was returned to the crew, but definitely a daunting moment. He was a member from the beginning to the end, and everybody really, really loved him and viewed him as a significant part of the journey. What you see in the small cage in front of Seaman is a prairie dog. When Lewis and Clark came across a prairie dog, they didn't necessarily know what to call it. So what they did call it is a barking squirrel, which I love. When we were talking earlier about keeping journals and being literate and being able to explain everything that you needed to be able to convey it to Thomas Jefferson, that was the best way that they could relate it. And I love it. At one point, Lewis and Clark sent a prairie dog in a very similar cage that was alive back to Thomas Jefferson in Monticello. And it was, it made it. It definitely made it.
The prairie dog.
Not this specific prairie dog, but yes. No, but a prairie dog in a cage very similar. Definitely. And it was one of the first wildlife encounters that Thomas Jefferson was able to experience from the Lewis and Clark journey. We're going to hear him now.
Here's the dog.
I know. He was our first animatronic. He's our good old boy. Even the little prairie dog will move its head back and forth.
Is this week? Like prairie dogs do?
Let's listen. Let's listen one more time. Did he stop?
Oh, the prairie dog moves too?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, prairie dog shadow. Well, thank you, Elizabeth,
Thank
for
you.
sharing your knowledge with us. She does this every day and used to be a school teacher for 10 years.
I was. I taught 3rd and 5th grade.
She started when she was about 12 years old.
Just quite.
All right, thanks for showing us.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day.